The awakening, the sound of the heart monitor pierced the silence with cruel precision. Helena opened her eyes as if returning from a deep dive. The white ceiling seemed distant, billowing like mist. There was a heaviness in his body, and the air in the room smelled of disinfectant. He tried to speak, but his voice came out harsh, almost a whisper. A nurse approached with cautious steps. "Calm down, you're safe," he said, checking her vital signs. Helena looked for a mirror, any reflection that would confirm her face. He was given a glass of water and the liquid burned his throat. The name didn't come immediately, just a pulsating emptiness. The pain throbbed in spots she didn't recognize. Burning scars lined the skin like train tracks, an arm in a cast, bandaged ribs, discreet sutures. The body was a map without a label, and she was a lost tourist. Who am I? He thought, swallowing back his panic. The doctor came in with a clipboard and tired eyes. She said they found her on the side of the road, unconscious. No documents, no cell phone, no address. Post-traumatic amnesia is common, he explained, trying to smile. Helena nodded, but the smile found no shelter. At night, the window reflected a face she barely recognized. Thinner cheeks, a weird haircut, a bandage on the top of his forehead. Stuck like an ancient seal, she touched the bandage and felt a shiver run down her spine. Outside, a dog howled, and the sound seemed to come from inside her. The nurse brought warm soup and a warm blanket. "Rest is all you need for now." Helena thanked him with a short gesture, her tongue heavy. On the radio, an old song spoke of returning home. She repeated mentally, "Back, but where exactly?" The following days blended together like ink and water. Physiotherapy, medicine, questions that stung like mosquitoes. "Do you remember anyone? A place? A name?" Helena closed her eyes and saw only headlights, and a figure, always a figure, standing at the edge of the track. One afternoon, the nurse commented on the dangerous road. "It's already taken a lot of good people," he said, with pity in his eyes. Helena felt an inexplicable chill in her stomach, as if the asphalt had swallowed something precious, as if a part of her was still there, asleep. During her assisted bath, she noticed a detail that paralyzed her, a small mole on the right shoulder, like a star. Recognition came like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't a whole name, but a spark of himself. The star seemed to say, "You've been here before." In the early hours of the morning, he woke up with his heart pounding. A word burned on the tongue like a high fever. "Raphael," he whispered, as if calling to his own soul. The nurse wrote it down without understanding, but smiled kindly. And Helena knew, there was a thread, and she would pull it. Remembering the name, Raphael. The name echoed through the room like a hollow footstep. Helena repeated, testing the weight of each syllable. It looked like a harbor, and also a lighthouse in the distance. The doctor asked if he was a husband, brother, neighbor. She didn't know how to respond, she just felt that it hurt. He asked for paper and pen with trembling fingers. He wrote Raphael 10 times, like a spell. Next to it, he drew a house with wide windows. And a boy with open arms, a crooked smile. The lines came out crooked, but warm with memory. The discharge was promised soon, with caution. But time dragged on like wet sand. Helena rehearsed her steps down the empty corridor. Ligaments complained, but obeyed. She needed to get out, she needed to find that name. In the cafeteria, he heard 2 technicians talking. They spoke of a nearby town, Santa Aurora. Everyone knows each other there, it's a mess. They laughed. The name lit something in his chest, a bell. Santa Aurora seemed like a half-open door. In the infirmary, he gathered the few things he had: a donated knitted sweater, a notebook with notes, a bottle of water and a pair of worn shoes. The nurse noticed, but said nothing. She just hugged him. "If it is, let it be by the most illuminated path." Helena waited for the last night shift. He walked out through the service ramp, taking a deep breath. The moon was a saucer hanging in the dark sky. The cold bit her skin, but she didn't flinch. Careful steps, heart racing. On the road, the landscape seemed to recognize his steps. Long fields, crooked fences, the smell of wet earth, an abandoned gas station, a silent bus stop. She asked for rides, few words, eyes downcast. When someone said Santa Aurora, she nodded quickly. The truck driver was talking about rains and harvests. Helena looked at the horizon, stitched together with posts. With each kilometer, the name Raphael took shape. sometimes a husband, sometimes a friend, sometimes a ghost, but always a center of gravity pulling her back. They arrived at dawn. Mist brushing the tiles, the city smelled of bread and old promises. Helena got out, her legs shaking, her eyes scanning everything. He asked for records, for clinics, for names. Someone pointed to the church. The priest knows everyone. In the churchyard, bells beat like a haunted heart. I'm looking for a man named Raphael, he said to the sacristan. He measured it curiously, as if recognizing echoes. Raphael Duarte? He asked, and the world fell silent. Helena just nodded, feeling the ground move. The ghost town, Santa Aurora, seemed suspended in time, like a memory that refuses to disappear. The cobblestone streets were wet from recent rain, and the church bell told the hours melancholy. Helena walked slowly, observing shop windows, corners, and faces that seemed to recognize something in her. With each glance they shared, a shiver ran down his spine. There was something deeply wrong with that familiarity. At the cafe in the square, she ordered a bread roll and a black coffee. The attendant, a lady with a kind look, stopped in her tracks when she saw her. I'm sorry, it's just, you look so much like. She hesitated. Helena put down the cup, her heart racing. With whom? He asked, trying to sound natural. The woman swallowed hard, her hands trembling. With Professor Helena Duarte, he said, lowering his tone. But, she died last year. The air in the place became heavy, and Helena felt her legs weaken, dead. She was hearing about her own death. She left the cafe without paying, dazed, stumbling over her own memories. The words echoed, Helena Duarte died. But she was Helena Duarte. She was there, alive, breathing. He ran to a newsstand and leafed through a local edition. There it was, tragic accident on the road. Dedicated teacher and mother does not survive. The photo was of her, or almost, the smile, the look. The clothes, but there was something subtly different about the face, an imperceptible feature. It's me, he murmured, but it's not me. The world was spinning, and she had to hold on to a pole to keep from falling. Determined, she went to the city cemetery. The guardian, an old man with a drawl, led her to a fresh grave. The tombstone shone with new letters, Helena Duarte, beloved wife and mother. May she rest in peace. She fell to her knees before her own name carved into the cold stone. The tears came soundlessly, burning brighter than the midday sun. The gentle breeze blew, making the wilted flowers sway. For a moment, he thought he heard a childish laugh coming from far away. He turned around and saw a boy playing with a red balloon near the gate. His smile disarmed her. It was the same one from her dreams. Lucas, he whispered, his voice breaking. He ran to him, but the boy got scared and ran away. A woman was waiting for him, waving from the sidewalk. A woman with his face. The balloon slipped out of the boy's hands and slowly rose. Helena stopped, the air trapped in her lungs. The woman turned, and their eyes met for a second that seemed eternal. The shock was so great that time split in two. That woman, identical to her, took the boy by the hand and got into a car. Helena tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come out. The car drove off, leaving only dust and a broken heart. She knew now, someone was living her life. At the cemetery gate, a priest approached with an expression of astonishment. My daughter, are you a miracle or a curse? He murmured. Helena lifted her tear-stained face. Neither, father. I'm just someone who came back, and I will find out who stole my life. The tomb. Helena spent the night in the cemetery, sitting next to her tombstone. The cold wind whispered through the cypresses, and she felt her whole body tremble. He tried to convince himself that there was a logical explanation, a mistake, a mix-up, but the image of the woman who looked just like her wouldn't leave his head. It was impossible to deny what he saw with his own eyes. At dawn, he walked to the church in search of the priest. He was waiting for her in the sacristy, holding a rosary between his fingers. You must tell me what happened, daughter, he said solemnly. Helena reported the accident, the hospital, the amnesia, and the name Raphael. The priest took a deep breath. His gaze heavy with something that knew too much. Raphael Duarte is your husband, he said finally. Helena felt a shiver run through her body. The word husband sounded distant, almost foreign. And, is he okay? He asked hesitantly. Very well, the priest replied. Married to you. The sentence fell like a blow. The priest explained that, after the accident, The body was identified by the husband. The funeral was discreet, but marked by emotion. Months later, Raphael reappeared with a woman just like her. He said it was a miracle. That you had been saved. Helena stood up, feeling the ground move. So he knows I'm alive? She asked, almost shouting. The priest looked away. I believe so. Anger began to burn beneath his skin, alive and pulsing. She left without saying goodbye, determined to confront the farce. Arriving at the main street, he recognized the old school where he worked. The windows still had blue curtains, and the gate creaked just as loudly. Children played in the courtyard, and a lump tightened in his throat. She was a teacher there. She was someone there, but now no one remembered her as alive. In the distance, he saw a woman arriving in a black car. The children ran, shouting, "Teacher Helena." The woman smiled, waving, the same smile that had once been hers. Helena hid behind a tree, her heart racing. The impostor lived every piece of the life that had been ripped from her. When the bell rang, the woman entered the school, and Helena approached the window. He heard laughter, familiar voices, the sound of the routine that was once his. But when the woman spoke, Helena felt a chill. The voice was identical, the same tone, the same rhythm, the same words she used. It was like watching one's own reflection come to life. She stood there for hours, watching, trembling. The sun set, and shadows swallowed the courtyard. Then he saw Raphael arrive, hug his wife and kiss her. Helena's world collapsed into absolute silence. Love, home, name, everything had been stolen from her. Back at the guesthouse where she was staying, Helena looked in the mirror. The tired face, the scars, the teary eyes, but there was something new there, determination. "Do you want me to stay dead?" She murmured. "Well, they'll have to bury me again." The woman in the window, dawn brought a heavy air, and the sky seemed to announce a storm. Helena woke up early, her heart pounding, determined to take a closer look. That morning, Raphael and the woman pretending to be her were at home, the same house where Helena had raised her son, taught him to walk and to dream. She needed to look that impostor in the eye, and maybe Raphael's too, with a scarf covering part of her face. She walked to the street where she lived. The houses seemed smaller. The neighborhood quieter than he remembered. From afar, he saw Lucas coming out of the gate with a backpack on his back. The boy waved to someone at the window, and then she saw her, the woman with her face. The shock made his legs wobble. The woman waved with the same gesture Helena made every day, the same serene smile, the same posture, even the way she ties her hair. Helena hid behind a fence, watching the scene unfold. It was like watching a twisted dream, too cruel to be real. Raphael appeared in the garden, helping Lucas into the school car. The touch of hands between him and the woman was slow, intimate, knowing. Helena felt her heart shatter, but hatred pushed the fear away. She needed to confront them, she needed to hear the truth from their own mouths. He waited for the car to leave and crossed the street as if walking through fire. He knocked on the gate. No answer. He knocked again, harder, until he saw the shadow approaching. The woman cautiously opened the door, and the world seemed to stop. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice soft. It took Helena a few seconds to breathe. "I want to speak to Raphael Duarte," he said firmly. The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise, or pretending to be. "He's not here." "But, you look," she didn't finish the sentence. Their gazes locked in deadly silence. It was like looking into a mirror that lies. "Who are you?" Helena asked, her eyes sparkling. The woman hesitated, took a step back. "I'm Helena Duarte." The sentence echoed in her chest like a gunshot. "That's a lie." "I'm Helena Duarte," she cried. Her tears streaming down her face. The impostor's face hardened, and she slowly closed the gate. Helena tried to push, but the lock was already in place. The woman on the other end just said, "Get help, young lady. You're sick." The sound of footsteps moving away made Helena's blood run cold. She recoiled, her chest heaving, feeling the weight of a new humiliation. The neighbor across the street watched her suspiciously. Minutes later, a police car appeared around the corner. The woman had called the police. The officers approached her cautiously, asking for documents. Helena tried to explain, but her story sounded too insane. "You need medical help, ma'am," they said condescendingly. It took hours to get out of the police station. Nobody believed her, nobody wanted to listen. the feeling of being alive and invisible gnawed at her mind. When night fell, she found shelter in a remote boarding house, and he swore he would return tomorrow, but in a different way, without warning. An imposter, Helena spent the next day observing the house from afar, every movement, every visit, every light on. The imposter left in the morning and returned at dusk, with sure steps. Raphael seemed the same man as before, serene, protective, but now strange. What had led him to accept such a farce? At night, Helena saw Raphael leaving in his car, alone. He took advantage of the moment and approached the half-open side window. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see the inside of the room, exactly as he remembered it, the family picture still on the wall, the same pillows, the same clock, but the sound of her laughter echoing through the house broke his heart. She watched as the woman spoke on the phone. The imposter laughed naturally, calling someone my love. The tone was too intimate to be fake. Helena felt her whole body tremble, a mixture of anger and disbelief. It was as if death had become a convenient disguise. A noise made her duck quickly. The imposter looked out the window, suspicious, eyes alert. Helena held her breath, hiding behind a bush. Her heart was beating so hard it seemed to betray her. After a few seconds, the woman came back inside. Helena stepped back, her body tense, and walked to the main street. I needed proof, something concrete to show who I was. He went into an old internet cafe and looked for old news about the accident, found photos, reports, tributes, everything confirmed it. She had been officially declared dead. On the screen, she read the name of the hospital where she had been taken, the same one where she woke up, but there was something I had never seen before, a footnote citing a witness. A woman who claimed to have seen the car leave the road, the name of the witness, Elisa Mora. Helena froze. That was the missing name. He left the internet cafe and walked aimlessly, trying to fit the pieces together. Elisa Mora. The woman who now lived her life. Everything indicated that she was in the car that night, and somehow he survived to steal what wasn't his. But why? And with whose help? Back at the boarding house, he wrote down everything he remembered in a notebook, details, dates, names, fragments of memories. He needed to protect himself in case something happened to him. The truth was beginning to emerge, and it was darker than he had imagined. Deep down, she felt that someone else was behind it all. Before going to sleep, he looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman in the reflection, the tired eyes, the scarred face, but the fire still burning. I knew Elisa wasn't acting alone. And that Raphael's love might not be as pure as he remembered. The silence of the night was heavy, a harbinger of something that was about to collapse. Suddenly, an envelope was pushed under the door. Helena approached cautiously, her heart racing. Inside, a handwritten note, "Stop looking. What you think you lost was never yours." She fell to her knees, the paper trembling in her hands, and fear finally arrived. Marks on the body. Helena woke up with her heart racing and the note still on the table. The sun had barely risen, and the silence of the room seemed to be watching her. He read the words again, searching for a meaning that wasn't there. It was never yours. The phrase sounded like a veiled threat, but what had she lost that didn't belong to her? In the bathroom mirror, his reflection looked different. The scars on his face and neck were clearer in the daylight. He ran his fingers over them, feeling the rough relief of the patched skin. An uncomfortable thought arose. What if they had done more than just sew her up? The thought of her body being altered made her shudder. At breakfast at the boarding house, the owner, a talkative lady, commented casually, "You're new around here, right? You look a bit like the girl from school. The one who died." Helena just smiled, pretending not to understand, and swallowed the cold coffee. Every phrase in the city seemed to mock his existence. She needed answers, and she knew where to start. She returned to the hospital where she had woken up, now pretending to be a distant relative. "I told the receptionist that I needed medical information." The woman told her to wait, and Helena observed the white doors and the sterile smell. Everything there seemed familiar and false at the same time. When they finally called his name, the fear had already started to pulse again. Dr. Marissa, the doctor who attended to her, received her with surprise and discomfort. "You came back?" he asked hesitantly. Helena noticed the tremor in the doctor's hands. "I need to understand what they did to me," he said firmly. The doctor closed the door and took a deep breath, as if deciding to cross a line. "What I know is that there were orders, Helena. Orders for you to be kept isolated. They said the case was confidential, and that there was a risk to their safety. Orders from whom? Helena asked, her voice sharp. Marissa hesitated, avoiding his eyes. From your husband. And from a woman named Elisa Mora. The name made the ground disappear beneath his feet. They asked me not to let her see anyone, the doctor continued, and that, if I asked about your identity, I should confirm the name. Elisa. Helena felt her body freeze. She had been renamed, rebuilt and erased at the same time. I should have reported it, Marissa said, tears in her eyes, but they were influential. The hospital owed Raphael favors. Helena leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. Now everything made sense. The accident, the silence, the rushed funeral. Raphael and Elisa had planned everything. Before leaving, Marissa held her hand tightly. There's something else, he whispered. A flash drive. In my office. Take it. Helena picked up the small device with trembling hands. What do you have here? He asked. The recordings from the night of the accident. And perhaps, proof that you never died. Back at the guest house, he locked himself in his room and turned on the old laptop on the counter. The video began with noises, heavy rain, and flashing headlights, then a voice, Raphael's, saying, she shouldn't have found out. Helena covered her mouth with her hand, tears falling uncontrollably, and then he heard a female voice reply, calm down. I'll sort this out. The hospital's secret. Helena watched the video dozens of times, unable to process it. The image was blurry, but it clearly showed her car, two figures nearby, Raphael and Elisa, fighting in the rain, then a burst of light, the noise of impact, and silence. Helena fell to the ground, feeling the weight of the truth settle in. They had planned the accident, but something had gone wrong. She survived, and instead of finishing the job, they decided to turn her into Elisa, erasing her. Identity was more convenient than killing her, the perfect death, no crime, no body, no questions. Her hands were shaking as she saved the video to several flash drives. I knew that if something happened, that file needed to survive, but how can I try everything without being taken for crazy? The city believed in a long-established version, and Raphael was seen as the exemplary widower. He decided to go to Marissa's house late in the afternoon to understand more. The doctor lived on the outskirts of the city, in an isolated house. When Helena arrived, the door was ajar and the light in the room was on. He called the doctor's name, but there was no answer. The air smelled of spilled coffee. And perfume, and something metallic. He entered slowly, his heart pounding. On the table were two cups, one still warm. On the floor, a broken pen drive and signs of a struggle, and then she saw it, a shadow running away from the back. He ran, but all he could see was a dark car speeding around the bend. Back at home, Helena locked herself in and cried until dawn. I knew I was alone now. Someone had silenced Marissa, and she would be next. But fear gave way to anger, and anger turned to purpose. He would no longer run away, he would fight for his life. The next day, she went to an internet cafe and sent copies of the video to herself. He wrote a scheduled email, if anything happens to me, look for Helena Duarte. The feeling of control comforted her for a moment. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel like a victim, she was a survivor, and she had a plan. At night, she returned to observe Raphael's house. Elisa laughed on the phone in the garden, completely at ease. Raphael arrived soon after, bringing flowers, the same kind she loved. Contempt and the desire for justice burned together in his breast. You stole everything from me, she murmured. But I'm still alive. As he watched, he heard footsteps behind him. A hooded man grabbed her arm, whispering, if you keep digging, you'll end up underground for real. She fought back hard, kicking and screaming, until he ran away, but the message was clear. They were watching his steps. Back at the boarding house, Helena locked the windows and turned off the lights. He took the flash drive and put it in his shoe, the only safe hiding place. He looked in the mirror, seeing an ancient flame in his own eyes. You wanted to bury me, but I learned to dig, he said softly, and for the first time, Helena smiled, the kind of smile that precedes revenge. Voices from the past. Dawn arrived shrouded in mist, as if the entire city breathed mystery. Helena had barely slept, replaying every detail of the video in her mind. Raphael and Elisa, two names that once meant love and friendship, now sounded like a sentence. but there was something at the end of the file that still intrigued her, a noise, almost a muffled whisper, repeated 3 times. He turned the audio up to maximum and listened carefully. Between the crackles of the recording, a female voice said, "She survived, the plan failed." And a male response, "Then finish the job." Helena felt a shiver run down her spine. That conversation was recorded after the accident. That meant someone knew she was alive, and had decided to leave her that way for a while, but why? Out of pity? Out of cruelty? Or to use her in some way? Uncertainty was a slowly spreading poison. He took out his notebook and began to write down connections, names and dates. Everything pointed to a web of lies much older than he imagined. He decided to look for an old school friend, Clara, who still lived in Santa Aurora. Perhaps she could confirm whether Elisa was already known before the accident. When she arrived at the simple house on the street of palm trees, Clara almost fainted when she saw it. "My God!" he murmured. "It's not possible." Helena held her hands. "It's me, Clara. I'm alive." They cried together for a few minutes, until Clara let her in. The little home smelled of soap and good memories, but as soon as Helena told what she knew, her friend's expression changed. "You need to understand something," Clara said, lowering her tone. "Elisa didn't just appear out of nowhere. She was already working in Raphael's office before her accident." Helena felt the ground open up beneath her feet. So the extramarital affair wasn't a consequence, it was the origin of it all, Clara confirmed. Raphael and Elisa were close, and there had been rumors for months. "You just didn't want to see," the friend said tenderly. The truth, spoken gently, still hurt like a knife. While they were talking, Helena noticed an envelope on the shelf. The name Elisa Mora was written in hurried handwriting. Clara explained that it had been left by a delivery man weeks ago, addressed to Helena. His heart raced. "And why didn't you hand me over?" "Because I thought you were dead," she replied, trembling. Helena opened the envelope with sweaty hands. Inside, a photo, her, Elisa and an unknown woman, in front of a clinic. On the back, a date from 10 years earlier and the words, "Project Aurora, Patient 03. Helena looked at Clara, astonished. "That's not possible." "I've never been here," he whispered. Clara tried to comfort her. But Helena was no longer listening. The image seemed to pulse in his hands, as if it contained something alive. This wasn't just a story of betrayal, it was something deeper, darker. Who was the woman in the photo, and what did Project Aurora mean? He left the house without looking back, his head boiling. He put the photo inside his shirt and walked aimlessly down the street. Every shadow seemed to watch her. Every window seemed to hide a secret. The past began to whisper, and the voices refused to be silenced. She swore, she would discover the origin of everything, even if it cost her own life. The hoax unmasked. Night fell over Santa Aurora like a heavy veil. Helena walked through the deserted streets, holding the photo and the flash drive. Now he knew enough to face Elisa, and perhaps Raphael himself, but fear mixed with adrenaline, danger with the need for justice. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted to burial again. He waited until he saw the house lights come on. Raphael's car was not in the garage. Helena went through the side gate and knocked discreetly on the back door. Elisa answered, with the same serene expression and eyes as cold as glass. "You again?" she said, exasperated. "What do you want now?" Helena entered without asking permission. "I want the truth." "Elisa." His voice came out firm, more than he expected. Elisa crossed her arms, feigning calm. "The truth? You wouldn't bear to know, then test me," he replied, looking at her. The silence between the two was thick as smoke. Elisa gave a half smile, almost pitying. "Raphael never loved you, Helena." The sentence cut through the air. "He always wanted someone like me. I just gave him the perfect version." Helena clenched her fists, feeling her blood boil. "You took everything from me," Helena said, her voice trembling. "I just took up the space you left empty," Elisa retorted coldly. "Do you think he cried for you?" "He chose me, Helena." The pain gave way to a dangerous calm. Helena took the flash drive out of her pocket and placed it on the table. "That's what separates me from madness," she said. "And what will destroy you?" Elisa looked at the flash drive hesitantly, afraid for the first time. "What's this?" he asked, trying to hide his nervousness. the night of the accident? The answer was almost a whisper. The imposter turned pale. Before he could react, Helena turned on the house laptop. The video began to play. Raphael and Elisa, on the road, arguing. The words were clear, the voices unmistakable. Elisa tried to close the computer, but Helena pushed her away. Look at you, Elisa. Do you see what you've done? He ordered it. Elisa shouted suddenly. Raphael ordered it. Helena stopped, shocked. What? The plan was to make me disappear with you, but the car got out of control, then why continue the charade? Helena shouted, because he promised me that, this way, I would never be forgotten. The two stood face to face, breathing heavily. Elisa began to cry, her face stained with guilt and fear. I didn't want it to be like this, he said softly. Helena felt a flash of pity, but quickly extinguished it. There is no room for two Helens in the same world. Suddenly, the sound of a car in the garage made them freeze. Raphael was back. Helena closed the laptop and hid behind the curtain. Elisa wiped away her tears, composed her face, and opened the door, but, seeing his look, Helena realized, the real danger had just arrived. The return home, the wind that night seemed to blow omens. Helena watched from the window the movements of Raphael and Elisa, now accomplices and executioners. The closed laptop on the table seemed to pulse, holding within it the destructive power they both deserved. She knew the moment to expose everything had arrived, and there would be no turning back. It was time to face death head-on. Once again, when Raphael went up to the room, Helena came out of hiding. Elisa turned pale when she saw her still there, alive, with eyes of fire. Are you willing to lose everything? Helena asked softly. I already lost when I let you live, Elisa replied bitterly. Helena just smiled. Then let's get this over with. The following day, the city celebrated the one-year anniversary of Helena Duarte's death. It was the perfect opportunity. She dressed discreetly, covered her face with a scarf and walked to the church. The streets were crowded, and the murmur of voices sounded like judgment. But she wasn't there to pray, she was there to be reborn. When the priest began his sermon, Raphael and Elisa entered together, hand in hand. People whispered, admiring the miracle of love that overcame tragedy. Helena waited for the right moment, her heart beating like a drum. Then, in the midst of the silence of prayer, she stood up. Father, I think there's a mistake here. I'm not dead. The murmur turned into cries of astonishment. Raphael turned pale, Elisa tried to back away, and the priest dropped the chalice. Helena walked to the altar, her steps firm, her eyes fixed on the two of them. Look at me closely, he said. Do you recognize the face of the woman you buried? The silence was sepulchral. Elisa tried to say something, but her voice failed. Helena pulled her laptop out of her bag and connected it to the church's screen. The video started playing in front of everyone. The rain, the car, Raphael's scream, Elisa's phrase, calm down. I'll figure this out. The sacred temple became a court, screams, exclamations, absolute chaos. Raphael tried to turn off the projector, but the faithful held him back. Elisa was trembling, her hands covering her face. Helena watched everything in silence, her heart divided between relief and pain. Truth, after all, had a voice, and it sounded like revenge. The police were called, and the news spread like wildfire. Cameras, journalists, neighbors, everyone wanted to see the miracle and the farce. Helena was taken to give a statement. Meanwhile, Raphael and Elisa were being interrogated in the same building. Fate, finally, had truly locked them in the same cell. At the police station, Helena told everything, without hiding anything. He showed the pen drive, the documents, the threatening note. The officers listened, stunned, as she recounted the horror of waking up without a face or a name. Finally, one of them asked, "What kept you alive, Mrs. Helena?" She took a deep breath and replied calmly, "The certainty that the truth does not die." Outside, the city murmured, torn between guilt and astonishment. Helena knew that her story was just beginning, and that the next battle would be to prove that it was still, in fact, she. The final confrontation. 3 days later, the case had made national news. Elisa Mora and Raphael Duarte are suspected of fraud and attempted murder. But while awaiting trial, they were released into custody. Helena knew the danger was not over. At night, he had a feeling, they would come. The sound of the forced gate confirmed the fear. she turned off the lights and waited, holding a lamp as a makeshift weapon. The shadows moved quickly, the footsteps were familiar. Elisa entered first, her eyes burning with despair. Raphael followed her, with the expression of a cornered man. "You destroyed everything," Raphael shouted. "Everything I built." Helena took a firm step forward. "I just took off the masks." Elisa was trembling, tears streaking her face. "He said you wouldn't survive." She sobbed. "I just wanted a life." Helena looked at her with a mixture of anger and pity. "And to do that, you had to steal mine?" he asked, his voice icy. Raphael approached, furious. "You should have stayed dead." The phrase echoed like a confession. Helena held the lamp tightly, but did not use it. He wanted the truth itself to crush him. Suddenly, sirens cut through the silence of the street. A neighbor, hearing the noise, had called the police. Raphael pushed Elisa and ran to the back. Helena followed him, and the confrontation unfolded in the rain. Two ghosts fighting over the same body in the story. "Did you love me, Raphael?" she cried, amidst flashes of lightning. He hesitated for a second, his gaze blank. "I loved the woman you pretended to be," he replied. Pain tore through Helena's chest, but she didn't look away. "Then learn, even a broken woman still knows how to fight." Raphael slipped in the mud, trying to escape through the woods behind the house. But the police arrived in time. Surrounding the land, Elisa, soaked and in shock, allowed herself to be held without resistance. Helena just watched, in silence, the outcome she never imagined she would see. The nightmare was coming to an end, or so it seemed, at the police station. Raphael and Elisa confessed in parts. He claimed the accident was a mistake, and that he had tried to rebuild his lost wife. She confessed to having assumed the identity out of love and fear, but none of them mentioned the clinic photo or Project Aurora. Helena kept this secret in her heart, like an open wound. The next morning, as he left the courthouse, the reporter asked, "What would you say to women who have felt left out?" Helena stopped, looked straight into the camera and replied, "That being forgotten is not the same as being dead, and sometimes, it is in forgetting that we learn to be reborn." Back in the empty house, he looked at the walls and took a deep breath. Silence was no longer the enemy. She lit a candle, in memory of all that she had been, and all that she was becoming again. The flame flickered, reflecting its new version in the mirror, and, for the first time, Helena smiled without fear. The trial of truth. The courtroom was packed. Cameras, journalists, and onlookers jostled for space to see the fate of the woman who returned from the dead. Helena sat in the front row, her heart torn between justice and exhaustion. On the other side, Elisa and Raphael kept their gaze fixed on the ground, like shadows of themselves. The judge leafed through the records, and the murmur of voices sounded like a distant choir. In that moment, Helena realized, the truth can be liberating, but it also comes at a high price. The prosecutor described the crimes with surgical coldness: fraud, ideological falsehood, attempted murder, and identity theft. The words sounded like stones thrown into the silence. Helena relived every moment, the accident, the hospital, the wake. But now, every memory was living proof that she had resisted. Elisa cried, her face devastated. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood up. "I envied her," he said, his voice breaking. "I wanted to be like her." Helena looked at her, but didn't answer. There was no more anger, just emptiness. Elisa lowered her eyes, knowing that prison would be the least of her punishments. Raphael, in turn, spoke with contained arrogance. "I was just trying to protect my son," he explained. "She was broken, and I needed to move on." Helena stood up, her voice firm, and replied, "You didn't protect me. You erased me." The silence that followed was more devastating than any sentence. When the judge announced the decision, Helena did not celebrate. Elisa was sentenced to 15 years in prison, Raphael to 8. The city watched in shock. The perfect couple revealed as illusion killers. But Helena's face, projected in the newspapers, showed something else, not revenge. Just survival. As she left, reporters surrounded her, microphones on all sides. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Duarte?" She took a deep breath before answering, like someone who died to the world and was reborn to himself. The cameras captured that steady gaze, proof that she was alive, back on the street. The sky was beginning to lighten, the fresh air carried the smell of wet earth, a reminder of the day it all began. Helena walked slowly, unhurriedly, observing the curious faces. Now, every step was a silent victory, but something inside her told her the story wasn't complete yet. When he arrived at the old house, he found everything empty: the cold walls, the echo of footsteps, the dormant memories. In Lucas's room, old toys were still on the shelf. She touched them tenderly, feeling her heart tighten. "My love," he whispered, "one day you will understand." He sat down at the table and began writing in a new notebook. "My name is Helena Duarte. I was presumed dead, but I never ceased to exist." He wrote not for others, but to remember who he was. Each word was a brick rebuilding his identity, and for the first time, writing didn't hurt. On the last page, he drew a star, the same one he had on his shoulder. He smiled. That mark was the reminder that life had sewn her back together, and as she closed the notebook, she felt whole. Even though she was made of scars, the worst was over. Now the new beginning began. The woman without a past. Months have passed since the trial. Helena moved to a small town in the countryside, where no one recognized her. He rented a little white house with blue windows and started a new routine. He worked in a bookstore, read a lot and spoke little. Loneliness, once cruel, was now a form of healing. Every morning, she walked to the nearby lake, where the wind carried the scent of flowers. She watched the birds and thought about time, the same time that almost erased her. The world had moved on, and so had she, but sometimes, the echo of the past came like a distant whisper, and the name Lucas still made his chest tighten. She never looked for him. He knew the boy needed peace, away from the weight of adults, but he followed him from a distance, discreetly. "I saw him going to school, laughing with friends, growing up, and that was enough." To love, sometimes, is to let exist without presence. At night, she wrote letters to herself. "Today I was able to sleep without fear. Today I smiled without pretending." Words became his most faithful companion. It was like sewing together the torn fabric of the soul, thread by thread. One day, a young customer entered the bookstore. "You look like a teacher I had in Santa Aurora," he said, smiling. Helena froze, but just replied gently, "It must be a coincidence," and he offered her a book about starting over. That night, when he closed the store, he found an envelope on the counter. No sender, just your handwritten name, Helena. She opened it, curious, and found a single photograph: 3 identical women, side by side, in front of the same clinic as in the old image. On the back, a recent date and a sentence: "You were never the only one." The ground seemed to move beneath his feet, his hands were shaking, and the photo almost fell. 3 women with the same face, her, Elisa, and a third unknown woman. A new enigma was born from the ashes of the past. Project Aurora. He read again, his heart racing. Suddenly, all the memories she thought she had buried came flooding back. The accident. The hospital. The feeling of being rebuilt. What if what happened to her wasn't just a story of betrayal? What if she was part of something bigger, and much darker? Fear returned, not as an enemy, but as a warning. Helena put the photo away in a book and looked at the horizon. The sun was setting behind the hills, dyeing the sky red and gold. She knew the past would come calling for her, sooner or later, but this time, it wouldn't be the lost woman, it would be the woman who decides her own story. She sat on the porch, the wind playing with her hair. He smiled slightly, his gaze steady. Life had ripped everything from her, and yet, she was still standing. "If I have survived death," he thought, "I can survive any truth." And the sound of the lake, in the distance, responded like applause. The new life, autumn arrived with its soft colors, and the cold wind brought sense of renewal. Helena now lived in silence, but it was a living, fertile silence. Mornings were filled with hot coffee and the sound of pages turning. Sometimes he thought that if he hadn't lost everything, he would never have found himself. Loneliness wasn't punishment, it was home. The bookstore had become his new home. Between bookshelves and other people's stories, she found shelter and meaning. Clients came and went, each with their own pain, each with their own quest. Helena smiled, recommending books that cured what words could not say, and, in silence, he saw a little of himself in each broken soul that passed by. One morning, a boy came in, curious, rummaging through the children's books. Helena immediately recognized the messy hair and the easy laugh. "Lucas." The heart stopped for an instant, time froze. He looked up, and their eyes met. "Do you work here?" The boy asked innocently. Helena smiled, holding back tears. I work, yes. Do you like reading? Very. My mother says books are windows. He laughed. She bent down to look into his eyes. And what do you see when you look out a window? Lucas thought for a moment and replied, what's out there, and what's inside us? The answer disarmed her. For a moment, I wanted to tell him who I was, to shout the truth, to hug him. But he held back. Some truths only make sense when the heart is ready. He bought an adventure book and left, waving. Helena stood in the doorway, watching him walk away. The tears came, but they were calm, light, like gentle rain. Fate had been cruel, but also generous. Somehow, she was still a part of her son's life, even without a name. When he closed the bookstore that day, he found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a single typed sheet. Helena Duarte, we want you to know that Project Aurora is still active. And you shouldn't be alive. No sender. No stamp, just the certainty that the past still had eyes. Helena smiled, but not out of fear. He put the letter in the drawer. Next to the photo of the three women, let them come, he murmured. This time, they won't erase anyone. She already knew who she was, and no one could take that away. The fear, now, was theirs. That night, she wrote another letter to herself. Dear Helena, you survived the impossible. Life tried to bury you, but forgot that you were a seed. He folded the paper and placed it between the pages of a book called Reborn, and when she turned out the light, the smile on her face said it all. She was ready for whatever came. Outside, the moon was reflected in the waters of the lake, serene. The wind whispered in the trees like an ancient song. Helena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Feeling life pulsate throughout her, at that moment, she understood. True love is surviving yourself, and the distant sound of footsteps on the road announced, the next chapter was about to begin. The woman who survived her own wake, Helena, is not just a symbol of overcoming obstacles, she is the voice of all the women who were once silenced, forgotten, or erased, and decided to be reborn.